Well, today's really about how do we address vulnerability within this state, and how do we look at services and improving services that will support children who we deem to be vulnerable. We're going to be joined, and it's with great pleasure that we're going to be joined by the Commissioner for Children and Young People from New Zealand, Judge Andrew Beecroft, who I'll introduce later on, and also the co-director of the Australian Centre for Child Protection, Professor Leah Bromfield. And they'll be supported by one of my staff, Ms Wilkins, who has done a lot of work on a paper that hopefully you've all had a chance to read, a discussion paper that we put out before the first speaker series. If you haven't had a chance to read that, I'd urge you to go back and have a look. I can also welcome Commissioner for Children and Young People from Tasmania, David Clements, and we are going to be joined by the Commissioner for Children and Young People from Victoria and Northern Territory later in the day. I'd also like to thank Rio Tinto. We do most of this on the smell of an oily rag, and Rio Tinto have been great supporters of the Commissioner's office over a long period of time, because they know that their future is invested in our future, which is our children. And I really do appreciate the fact that they contribute to not only this type of event, but other things within our community, and I'd like to acknowledge Rio for that. As you know, my role's pretty simple. It's to look after the 589,000 kids under the age of 18 and their best interests in Western Australia. I think I've spoken to 3,427 of them so far this year, but I'm going to try and get to the 589,000. My legislation, though, is very specific, and it's to make sure that the interests of Aboriginal children and those who are vulnerable are absolutely brought to front and centre, and so that's why this series is a really important one. And vulnerability is a really broad term, and it's a term that is thrown around a bit loosely, really, because we kind of pigeonhole people if we think they're vulnerable or they're not. All of our 589,000 children at any stage can be vulnerable. Marie's story of a little 2.5-year-old grandson can be vulnerable in the flick of a switch. And we need to make sure that we understand how to address each and every one of those elements about vulnerability into the future. And to give you some examples, we know that 1/3 of the children who attend school for the first time and full-time schooling aren't yet ready. ADC information tell us that. That makes them vulnerable to their learning. Nearly 7% of children who are registered as living in poverty, we know that's a very, very low and conservative number. In fact, it could be a lot more if we could get really good information and real data. We know in 2015-16 there were over 600 young people under the age of 17 presenting as homeless. And again, that is masked by the fact we don't know how many are living in cars with mums or dads, or living elsewhere on couches with friends. So the size of the problem is quite large. We also know that our child protection numbers are growing exponentially, with almost 5,000 children now in child protection. I'm not saying that's a bad thing for those children, because we are attempting to support them. But the fact that we have 5,000 children in that space means that they are vulnerable. And then in youth justice cycle, we know that in any one day there's around 720 young West Australians who are going to be somewhere in the justice supervision process. So how do we support them to not get into trouble in the first place? I know people sitting in this room spend every waking hour trying to solve those problems. And today we're not going to solve every one of them, but this is a journey. And the idea of the speaker series is to build a catalogue of information so that at the end of this year, we'll be producing a report based on all the information that we've gathered, and hopefully, with decision makers, let's look at a real step forward in how we address vulnerability into the future. For those who attended the first session with Professor Donna Cross, Steve Zubrick, and also Alan Duncan, those presentations are on my website if you didn't see them. You know that we started with a focus on what was the poor outcomes for children. Today is really leading us in looking at how can we use services better, and how do we understand that? One of the ways we do that is look at a field and say, how do other people's addressed a similar problem. What are their strengths and what are their pitfalls? So I'm really excited that we have the quality of our speakers that we have today.
Okay, so since the Office of the Commissioner for Children and Young People was established 10 years ago, we've consulted over 11,000 children and young people in WA. We've heard from children and young people from a diversity of backgrounds, ages and locations across the state on a range of important issues that affect their lives and their well-being. And a number of those children and young people have experienced significant adversity and hardship. And across these many consultations, there is a common thread among all young people's views, regardless of their background. They all describe the same things as important in their lives: to live in safe, stable and nurturing homes, to go to school and get an education, and to have people who love and care for them. As the Commissioner has touched on, despite the efforts of governments and communities and considerable public expenditure, some children and young people are still not having these fundamental needs met. We're all aware that there are many children and young people in our state who are not always safe and whose well-being is at risk on a daily basis. And this tells us that what we're doing isn't working. There's an urgent need to look at how to do things differently, to improve current policies and services and strengthen our support for vulnerable children and young people in WA and make sure they don't fall through the gaps. So this has prompted the Commissioner to initiate the work on vulnerability this year, which started with the release of the vulnerability discussion paper in March. And as the Commissioner mentioned, if you haven't already seen this paper, it's available on our website to download. And the paper uses the direct views of WA children and young people to increase our understanding about why some young people are vulnerable to poor wellbeing and to advance the discussion on how to best address the causes of adversity that impact children and young people. And just to point out, the quotes on my slides throughout this presentation are all the words of children and young people who the Commissioner's Office has consulted on the many different projects we've done, and also feature throughout the discussion paper. So the Commissioner is now hosting this vulnerability speaker series and bringing together government and non-government agencies to open up conversation on vulnerability and to explore new approaches to addressing the challenges facing vulnerable WA children and young people to inform more effective and also collaborative responses. To ensure the voices of children and young people remain at the centre of this work on vulnerability, we interviewed and filmed a number of WA young people who have had different experiences of adversity in their lives. So we're going to meet these young people now in this video.
My name is Vanessa. I'm 21 this year. I grew up in Perth. I had a normal childhood, I guess. I was born blind. I had optic atrophy, which means I only have 20% vision in my eyes. I was born hearing and I became deaf when I was 7.
I'm Ben, I'm 18 years old, turning 19 in June. I knew I was a trans man since I was 15 years old. My childhood consisted of me doing what I thought was normal and people coming up to me and saying a sentence that was, "You're not doing this right." That's abnormal. And I had to think about it. And I really think throughout all the years of that, developed my anxiety.
I'm Kalijah. I'm 14, turning 15. In the later years of primary school and my first year of high school, I had some tall poppy syndrome. So kids made fun of me because I got the best grades and because I tried in class. And I just let what peers said, their negative comments affect and control me. And it was an unpleasant experience, to say the least.
My name's Lily. I am 20 years old. I grew up in the care of the Department for Child Protection from the age of 6 until I turned 18. Some of my experiences would be homelessness, mental health. I struggled with feeling like I belonged somewhere, didn't feel like I had a home, didn't feel like I had a family.
My name is Philip and I'm 20 years old. I was born deaf from my dad. So my dad was deaf when he grew up. And when we were little, we can't live with our parents and we got moved up to our grandpa that look after us.
My name's Tamika. At the age of 14, my mum took her life. And then within that same week, my dad went back to jail. So it was me and my brother just living together. He was 16 at the time. So we were both going to school and working to try and pay off a mortgage.
I'm Kelly, I'm 26. In hindsight, now see that there were things that were also missing in my life. Until I was maybe 14, felt like I had to be there for my parents instead of my parents being there for me. Having that lack of healthy attachment led to some significant mental health issues for me.
My name is Shantae. I'm in year 10. I'm 15 years of age from Swansea Senior High School and I grew up in Perth. My childhood growing up was a little bit chaotic, I'm not going to lie. My biggest challenge is probably my mother passed away when I was 5 and my dad living in a nursing home for nearly my whole life. And it's just hard not having your parents there for moral support.
So I'll just pausing it there, but we will hear more from those young people in a few moments. And obviously, it's very powerful hearing what children and young people say, and yeah, I know that usually affects people to hear those stories, and it will be really useful to hear then also what they have to say about supports and services in their life. Okay, so we can see from those young people that we spoke to in the video that they're vulnerable for very different reasons and have had a range of experiences and challenges in their life. So we saw things from mental health issues, disability, gender identity, bullying and family problems, as well as a number of others. So we heard at the first vulnerability seminar about a number of factors that can have long-term impacts on children and young people's well-being, such as things like poverty, trauma, family dysfunction. However, we also learned from Professor Steve Zubrick that it's not particularly effective to try to predict children's long-term well-being based on these risk factors, because no single risk factor on its own leads to poor well-being. Rather, risks tend to cluster and accumulate. So their impact on children and young people varies depending on factors such as the child's age when they're exposed to the risk, the type of risk they're exposed to, and so on. Also, focusing on each risk can put too much emphasis on the individual child and doesn't create the space to explore the systemic and structural factors on children, such as, for example, the impact of racism or the impact of a welfare policy change on a family that has children. Professor Zubrick's framework clearly displays the benefits of shifting away from a focus on individual risks towards building an understanding of the broader processes that result in vulnerability. And he describes the developmental circumstances that encourage and discourage children's development, including biology, expectations, and opportunities. The expectations adults have of children and young people, so whether that's the expectations a parent has of their child or a teacher has of their student, or that society holds for certain groups of young people, as well as the opportunities children have to realise expectations, are a significant influence in their lives and comes through strongly in the stories that children and young people have shared with us. So just as a very simple example, around expectations. A child with a disability whose parents expect and give him opportunities to participate fully in civic life and whose school is inclusive and expects him to achieve academically is likely to have more positive well-being and achieve his potential compared to a child with the same disability who has far fewer opportunities and resources available to him and lower expectations held of him. Young people who experience adversity have often spoken about when their environments don't offer the stability, safety and support. They often will seek a means of escape that can lead to things like drug and alcohol use, school exclusion and criminal behaviour. And along these pathways, their opportunities diminish and young people become further marginalised and disadvantaged and commonly experience serious issues such as sustained homelessness, repeat involvement in youth justice and unemployment. And in 2016, the Commissioner consulted almost 100 young people in the youth justice system, and many of them described this series of events in their lives. And the quotes on the screen there are from young people who were in the youth justice system and really highlight that point, I think, really well. These experiences often then form cycles within families, which we all know as the intergenerational cycle of disadvantage. However, and this is really an important point, is that there are multiple points on this cycle at which the right systems of support and intervention at the right time can interrupt the cycle of disadvantage. And this is particularly the focus of today's discussion. So now we'll go back and hear a bit more from the young people we interviewed about the key sources of support in their lives.
It was my older sister in the end that she said, tomorrow you're going to a doctor and then you're going to a shrink and you're going to get anti-anxiety and depression. And she saved my life. My whole family saved my life, really, my mum as well.
My mum and my nan have really been the rocks of my life, and they've always stuck like glue and stuck everyone together, and without them I don't think I would have gotten as far, without their encouragement and their support.
My grandma. Yeah. She's very nice and she was helping us out. And I was learning sign, then I had a sign that, yeah.
The people who supported me most through the challenging times was probably my family. My role model would probably be my nan, because my nan is really strong and she's gotten through the toughest times and she's always been there for me, even though how tough it got, she's always there for me.
I was linked in with a youth worker who really made me believe in myself, in who I was as a person, and showed me that I could be what I wanted. I wasn't this kid in care, I was just Lily. And she's been in my life for 4 years now, and it's the closest attachment I've ever had to having a parental figure or a mother-daughter relationship where I could just be open completely with her about anything and she wouldn't push me or tell me what I was doing was wrong. She'd let me come to that consensus myself.
The teacher who was in charge of that position really let me be creative in ways that I definitely wouldn't be now, but were important for me at the time, which was really helpful for me to have kind of that freedom of expression still within structure, to have someone I could talk to about the things I was doing, who supported me and guided me at the same time, but still gave me that kind of freedom that you really want as a young person.
it just makes you feel like you're not alone. And I think that's really important when you're struggling with this and your family's against it, or they don't understand, and you're maybe having a bit of tough time with your doctors. You can just come to a bunch of people who are going through the same thing you've gone through, and they're just like, yeah, I know that sucks, right?
I fell pregnant at the age of 17. I was really lucky to work where I did because we ran the Eyes Wide Open program, which is for young mums. So that was my support as well. I wasn't just there working, like I was actually there being supported by all the other young mums as well. It's just like a safe environment for people just to let go, not to feel judged, to get out the house for the day, do lots of fun stuff and learn as well.
I think as long as people have the right support, the right network, they can really do whatever they want in the future.
The first person I came out to was my psychologist. Actually, I think she began me questioning all this. So I came back to her 2 weeks later, and I said, so it turns out I'm a boy. And she was like, that's great, but I don't have the qualifications to treat you for that. I know she was just doing her job, but I just felt like a freak because there was no one that I could ask help for. I just feel like sometimes you place so much trust at the hands of health professionals, and when they look at you dumbfounded, it's like your world tips over.
Through high school, that was a really bad experience for me. I was very isolated. My school did not provide interpreters every day for me. They did not give me the correct support that I needed. So sometimes I would go to school and there was no interpreter, so I'd just go home because I didn't want to be there if I wasn't going to have access. For me, a person with a disability, it was a terrible discriminatory experience for me.
Although I had teachers who supported me as me, I definitely didn't have people who were able to pick up what was going on at home. I imagine that if I did, I may have been able to form a healthy, secure attachment elsewhere and maybe not have progressed into a full-blown personality disorder.
So again, we see how powerful their stories are, and having sat down and interviewed and spoken with all of those young people, it just never ceases to impress me how articulately they describe their experiences and can reflect so well on what did and didn't happen for them. And it's really critical in hearing those stories, how critical it was that they have support in their lives, and also the lasting impact when they feel they were let down by the people, the school, the services that should have been there to support them, as Ben, Vanessa and Kelly all explained. So for many of the young people also, a family member was the person who played a significant role in supporting and encouraging them through the challenges they experienced. And often this was a grandparent. So we saw that Shantae, Kalida and Philip all talked about their nans as being a key source of support. And then for those who didn't have a stable and nurturing family, they found support in other trusted adults and peer support networks. So Lily talking about the youth worker she engaged with and formed a strong bond with, and also Ben talking about the trans peer network that he accesses. We also should recognise the remarkable resilience young people themselves demonstrate to overcome hardship, but at the same time we mustn't expect or rely on their personal resilience alone to carry them forward. They still need effective systems of support that draw on their individual strengths to meet their needs. And we see that when they are supported and given opportunities and resources to engage at school, participate in their communities and develop stable relationships, they can and do create positive pathways in their lives. So there is a critical role for services to play in providing the right support in the right way at the right time. This includes identifying and intervening at the most opportune times, involving families and communities, and having culturally safe services. But also, very importantly, ensuring the systems that drive services that support vulnerable children and young people have at their core mechanisms that encourage and enable workers to have the time and the resources needed to engage with young people and build trusting, respectful relationships, and to support them in a way that respects their autonomy. This is a critical point that children and young people have raised with the Commissioner consistently, and which the evidence also supports. Staff having the time for and the ability to build trusting, respectful relationships is key. With the current direction and efforts in WA to achieve greater collaboration when working with children and young people, families and communities, it's timely to open up this conversation and to together develop new and innovative ideas for how to better address the issues faced by children and young people who are vulnerable. And our guest speakers today will be providing many insights which will contribute to this dialogue on how government and non-government agencies can improve systems and services to better support children and young people. We'll screen the final part of the video where young people give their views on how systems and services can better support vulnerable children and young people.
I think we need more education for the teachers and the principals and the EAs and all the staff, more PDs, more training, more workshops and hands-on workshops about disability, just to make sure that the people with disability enjoy school and not hate it, not have a bad experience. I think for me, the most important thing is for people to have an open-mindedness, an open attitude, and be very positive, not negative against disability. People always underestimate me. They underestimate my ability.
It's important to get education around this, because I think if people know more about it, and if it becomes just like a boring, normal thing, then automatically treatment and social stigma and just transitioning itself will be so much easier, and there'll be less roadblocking.
I told them, when you full deaf or half deaf, it's a hard look for job. But when I start working in St. John, I got someone who helped me, like tell the kitchen and all the staff when they're working with me, eye contact. Don't walk away while you're talking. I don't understand. Yeah.
So I'd love to see teachers educated in the skills around, mindfulness, like just being aware of yourself and what's around you, but then like emotional regulation, distress tolerance and effective communication.
I'm not always like by the books and big words in counselling and, like across the desk from each other, and like a lot of kids find that really intimidating. Like go take them down the beach and kick a footy or play some basketball or do some yoga, do some stuff that they get into that they can get something from as well, instead of like making it so clinical.
I believe that people who want to work with young children, they need to be understanding and empathetic, and they have to know that not every child is the same, so don't treat them like they are the same and they all have different problems. And, don't try to enforce your decisions on them and let them make up a situation and a decision on their own.
I honestly think that every young person should have a point where they have a mentor, where that just takes them out and they don't do anything serious. They just go and do something fun, something that this young person probably wouldn't have the chance to do, something that a mum or a parent would take their daughter out to do, like getting your nails done. It's good to feel like you're the most important person in this world.
There's a lot of policies in schools that I think they're having problems with. There's a problem with uniforms, and also bathrooms is a big one. I didn't go to the bathroom 4 years while I was in high school. I didn't, because facing the male-female every day, I couldn't do it. Everyone can see which one you're choosing. So I didn't go to the bathroom. And I think if they just had in place a bathroom with no icon that just said bathroom.
So I think supporting young people when you're working for the department under your policies and procedures can be really difficult, but that's when a lot of them stand back and be really, really professional, and it's just, I like to know the person I'm working with a little bit. I don't want to know if like you're married or like your personal life, but I want to know something about you, like your favourite colour, your favourite food, something that makes me think that you're another human being, not just someone behind an office chair.
To support Aboriginal children and their families, I think that there should be a more clear focus on culture because and togetherness, because in Aboriginal culture it's a real big thing that everyone's like together and everyone's a family. That's our mob.
I wish that the government would send a pamphlet in the mail and that mum would open it and it would be, what is transgender? This is what transgender is. This is how you transition. And I wish for it so dearly that every time I had a bad moment, I'd think, the letter's coming.
I have had opportunities to speak with other people at university, and that's where I got to meet with people who are, graduating and becoming doctors or like in pharmacy. And my aspirations and plans for the future is to study medicine to become a doctor.
I struggled in my own, believing in myself, and to have someone else believe in me was what made me think that I could believe in myself. To not give up on us as people, even when you might think that there's no hope, there's always hope for someone to change. Everybody can change, it's just the choice, and it's situational. If people give up hope, why should we have hope in ourselves?
There's really no stronger impetus for us to stop and reflect on how to do things better than to listen to the experiences and views of young people who've experienced adversity. So hopefully these videos serve a good reminder for us all about the value in taking the time to listen to children and young people. And then the next critical step is how we respond to what they tell us and take action so that all children and young people in WA have the support and opportunities to reach their potential. I would just like to finish by acknowledging and thanking all of the young people we interviewed for this video for generously and courageously sharing their stories with us. Thank you.